Welcome to an Emerson PAC Machine Edition 10.6.219 overview. This presentation is brought to you by TMMI. In this presentation, we'll be covering an overview and highlight of the new simulator embedded in the 10.6 and newer versions of Machine Edition. We'll also be highlighting the new data monitor that has replaced the previous data monitor in older versions of PAC Machine Edition. Within PAC Machine Edition, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to call it Sample Project. I can create any number of different controllers as an example. Test template. I'm going to start with the RX3i. Within this target, that is, if you look at the inspector, my RX3i by default, because that's what I selected. I can configure my hardware to be any number of different hardware components. For example, especially to get things rolling, I'll want to come in and assign an IP address of some sort. Is for our testing purposes. So for example, we'll just pop in here something to do this rolling. We could configure an IP address, similar or to the LAN 1 on LAN 2 as well if we wanted to. So we'll go ahead and pop in something here as well to get us going. And we could add I/O if we'd like to. For example, we could come in here and add in a digital input of some sort. We could add in, as if it were a input card. So for example, let's have it start on 1. It's conflicting because of my status here on my Ethernet card. So we'll go ahead and push that out of the way. So just a basic configuration for hardware. We could have a digital output as well if we wanted to. For example, we could have both 9030 and RXI mixed, or we could, standardize on one or the other, etc. And we could continue to add analog, digital, etc. So in terms of a hardware configuration, we could do that. We could also come in here and start to write a little bit of logic here. So I could come up to my ladder editor. I could click, and I could type in a name. For example, input 01, comma, % I1, so that it's the first input on my input card, enter. So that's my name and address at the same time trick. I can right click, I can adjust my cell width, and I can bring that ladder in and out so that it looks better to me. I could come over as well to my LD instructions because I'm using ladder in this case. And I could add another contactor coil. So if I come over here, instead of a click, up in the upper here where it's click, and then it stays on my mouse sort of a thing. So we'll put another input here. Example like that. Instead, I could come over here and it's a click and a drag over instead of a click. So it's a drag. So this could be my input 03, comma, % I3, or if I don't like typing the %sign, I could do 3i as a shortcut. So a couple of shortcut ideas for you. I can also come over here and drag, noting that if I were to drag a coil over here, it's going to jump to the end because it's an end terminating instruction. So this could be my output _01, comma, %Q, and maybe I'll let the software just grab the first available or next available depending on my option setting. So in this case, it'll be Q1, which is going to be associated with my output card that I populated in my rack, for example. I could also do, if I knew the type of instruction, I could start typing it and hit enter. I can use my control and arrow buttons to draw lines in addition to the wire here. And so I could have another, maybe this is my auxiliary, comma, and we'll do %M. Because I'm using a PAC system, I could also just leave it just as a name without an address like this. So this is termed a symbolic address because it does not have a reference address associated with it. So I can mix and match. I do not have to address because this is a PAC system. So for example, if I created a bit of logic like this, the simulator works as such. So currently and right now, I am not at all connected to a controller of any sort on my desk. I have no communications to that whatsoever. Instead of clicking on my target down below and then my target tab up above here, and instead of connecting to a physical controller on my desk, which is what you do with the connect here, or conversely, I can also show this off with a right click and connect. There's now a new selection called connect to simulator, whether you right click or if you click on the connect above. So if I connect to the simulator, the neat part about this is if I click on this connect to simulator, that's all it takes to enact the simulator in the software. So what the software is doing is it is actually going to take this target and it is going to connect as if it were an simulated target. In this case, it's an RX3i. So it is connecting to that instead of physical controller on my desktop and connecting via Ethernet or COM. And just to highlight that, if I look at the properties, the method of connection typically when I'm connecting to a physical controller out there on my desk, I would need to put the method of connection. So for physical port, either COM 1, 2, 3, 4, in this case I've selected Ethernet. But notice that in this case, even though I've selected Ethernet, I don't have an IP address. It would yell at me if I weren't connecting to the simulator because I need a physical IP address to connect to a controller on my desk. In this case, however, I am using the simulator, so it's kind of neat to point out the fact that I don't actually even have an Ethernet IP address in there because I am physically connected to the simulator and not to a physical controller on my desk. So from here, I am now connected to my simulator. See down below, it says sim. It does not say that I'm connected to a controller on my desk, so it says sim. And I am currently in monitor mode, hence the blue coloring. If I change that from monitor mode, so just like I would as if I was connected to a controller on my desk, but I'm not, I'm connected to the simulator, I can click on this programmer mode, or again, I could right click, go to online commands and go to set programmer mode, either way if you like the right click. So if I click on either programmer mode here or set programmer mode down here in my right click, I then change to green in color here and down here because now I'm in programmer mode. Notice that I am stop disabled. My config and my logic are not equal, and that's because I need to download this to the simulator. So it's really neat. Again, I'm on the simulator. So I can select download, or I can select download and start. I'm going to do it one and then the other so you can see it happening. So I'm going to download. It's acting like it's a unit on my desk, but it is not. So similar to that, I would just download my hardware, my logic, my initial force, anything that wasn't equal down here. In my case, nothing is, so I'll download it all, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. Once it completes the download, and just like a target on my desk, I would need to be free of errors in order for that download to complete. But notice once I do complete properly, that red X goes away from my target. That is because now my config and my logic are equal, and I see that down in the lower corner. Similar to an actual controller on my desk, I am not running. So see, I'm stop disabled. So I do not have a sweep because I am not running. So in order to set it running, just like a controller on my desk, but again, I am on a simulator. We'll go ahead and start that controller, that simulation, and I'll hit outputs enabled and OK. So the second that I do that, you'll notice that I now have a sweep, and that is because my simulator is in run enabled. You'll notice now that any variables that are or should be energized in logic, so for example, in this case, a normally closed contact for a variable that is currently 0 or off should be energized. So you'll notice that this one is energized. So the neat part about the simulator is if I then right click, so notice that I'm right clicking on the target variable that I would like to do something with. I could also use my inspector to modify it, but if I right click, I can toggle IO, I can force the IO, I can turn on and off or force on and off, which is what you'd be doing with the toggle IO and toggle force. So if I toggled this IO, notice that it now enacts that variable to turn on or be a 1 in this case. I could do the same thing over here. Again, I could right click and I can say toggle IO, but notice that my shortcuts over here, so F12 and F11 for F12 being toggle IO, F11 being force IO. So notice that I can also click on here and on my keyboard hit my F12 and I can toggle that on and off. So I'm just hitting my F12 in this case, and it is toggling my output on and off because I'm toggling my energizing on and off. So kind of a neat function, very simplified, but just highlighting that simulator component. The simulator works with any and all of your program blocks. So whether it's written in ladder, structure text, or function block, it does not matter. The other item I wanted to highlight in the video today is underneath your utilities tab here. Now the data monitor is located and always has been located under your utilities tab. So if I open up the data monitor, what is unique or new, so I'm going to click on that, is we've always had the data monitor here, but it is a new data monitor. So I wanted to point this out in this video. So I'm going to use those variables that I was just playing with and working with on the logic that I just wrote, very simple logic. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop. Notice I switched to my variables tab. I'm dragging and dropping. The other option I have here is I can right click and add a variable. So if I wanted to see how there's a bunch of pounds, so I could add like a system tag, like a pound t minutes, which is on for 1 minute and off for 1 minute. So you're going to see it transition every minute, go up high and then down low. Notice that my 1, so see there's the minute, it just transitioned to a 1 and then it will go low after a minute. Notice that my input 3 is currently high. If I did click on my input 3 here and turned that current value to a 0 or off, notice how that now goes low. So this is just highlighting that new data monitor tool. Couple of things to point out that are unique and new to this data monitor as opposed to the previous monitor. You'll notice the transitions and the little points here that give you a more accurate time indication as to when that event occurred. So it's a little more accurate there. You are able to come up here. There's a ribbon bar that enables you to do some unique things that you couldn't do with the previous data monitor. So you used to have to click on each individual variable in the old data monitor like I'm doing here, and for example delete that last one, so you'd have to click on them individually. Now if you had a couple of variables in here, so if I added my output, for example, and I added, and I can drag over as well, so several of them, I can come up here and not only can I click, right click and click on this, but I can add variables, but I can also clear all the variables very quickly and get a blank screen going for myself, so that's kind of neat. Again, I can drag over and start watching IO again fairly quickly. I can also use this little clear plotted data, to quickly clear any data that I was currently plotted and kind of refresh or start anew if I didn't want to have kind of a cluttered up view. I can also use this panning tool that would enable me to kind of pan back and forth. I can do my scroll or zoom, if you will, in and out. So this tool right here would allow me to zoom out. I can go forwards and backwards in time. I can pause. So that just paused my time frequency here. And then I could go back in time. I can set a different kind of skip forward or skip backwards time frequency. So this is skipping forward, that's skipping back by 10. But I can change that frequency to anything within that 0 to 60. And then a really cool tool, I can print this visible window. So I often get, so I'm going to go hit my play button, have it start running again. Maybe we'll come up here and we'll turn this current value to a 1 again, so we get some kind of cool stuff going on. So I can come over here, and if we skip forward here, and we're now real time over here, if you look, I can hit the print button, and as long as I have a connected printer of some sort, I can select that printer and print actively what I'm seeing on my screen. Even better, I can also configure a file location and a file and save them off. So see this save and save as. So I can actually save this data so that I can take it to my desk and actually look at the files. In addition to printing them, I can look at the actual data coming in and out. So that's something that's kind of unique and new, and certainly something that we've been asked for in the past. So right now I'm real time, but if I save this data off with that configuration, I could go back to my desk when I'm not connected to a controller and go ahead and open that file back up and take a look at that file in this monitoring tool to really dig in, maybe zoom in, zoom out, etc. The other thing that you can do is you can select particular, if you had multiple IO points, you can select which one to kind of be your main focus and the one that you're working with and looking at. So kind of a really new, unique component. And then the last item I would say that you can take a peek at in this new ribbon bar up here is this configuration component here. So you can actually set and save off these configuration components. So for example, if you wanted to always open up files with a certain time span, duration, and time format, you could set that for X, Y. You could set particular formats for coloring, like let's say you didn't like this, default of red, blue, green, you could set them to be something else and pull those configurations in, something that you're commonly looking at, for example. You might want to have a common configuration that you pull in so that you're quickly looking at and monitoring some data coming in. Perhaps it's a problem that you commonly are looking at, or maybe it's machine data that you commonly would look at from the health of your machinery type of thing. You can currently only simulate one target at a time. So in order, for example, if I had another controller in here that I had added in, and let's say I wanted to now simulate that different controller, notice how I can't do anything until I'm done with this particular simulation. So to stop the simulation and to finalize our video here, I can come over here, and instead of disconnecting to a controller, in this case I'm connected and working with my simulator, if I hit the disconnect button right now, I would be disconnecting from the simulator, and at that point then I could add, for example, another controller of some sort Once I added that controller and some logic, maybe I'd want to simulate that. If you have multiple targets in a project, you need to make sure that that's the target that is active. So a couple ways of doing that. Number one, you can see that it's bolded, but also if I right clicked on it and set active target is grayed out, that is the active target. I can also come up here to activate and it notifies me that target 2, not target 1, is now the active target. If I wanted to switch back and forth, I certainly could. So now I could connect here to the simulator instead of the simulator up here, and I could then get into my programmer mode, do my download and start. I'm going to combo that because my config and logic is not equal, so very similar to what I did with my previous. And then the key here, guys, is that if you have errors of any sort, so notice how I didn't do any sort of preparation like I did on this previous target. So notice that I do have errors, just like if I were trying to load a actual controller. So if I do have errors, I'm going to click on them. I'm going to fix them. So this needs an IP address of some sort, for example, like this, right? And we typically would put in some sort of a subnet max, etc., that sort of a thing. I don't necessarily have to have logic like I had done previous on the other one, so I'm going to go ahead now at this point and do a download and start. And as long as I don't have errors, it will rock and roll and start the controller, and then my config and logic will be equal. So again, similar to the previous one, but I wanted to highlight that if you don't have things right to where you don't have errors, it certainly won't load. It's just like a controller. It's simulating a controller on your desk. But I don't necessarily have to have logic. So see, I don't have logic. The simulator, I'll point out one more thing. If I did add like a contact here, notice how just like a controller, I can start to make online edit changes with my test edit mode, or I can lose logic equality, which means then I'd have to load that or download that change once I was done making the logic change, because I would go logic not equal down here. So if I entered test edit mode, similar to if I was connected to a real controller, added a sensor input of some sort here. I'm going to make that symbolic, and we went to just a simple coil over here, and we'll say this is output XX, let's say. So once I was done with the logic, I could right click, test edit, and begin a test. I could also come up here and do that in my ladder editors. Once I begin a test, that same selection for debug is going to be up here, but I can also, so if I begin that test, I think I'm happy with it, I then could accept those test edits. So everything you can do with a simulated target is what you can do with an actual controller on your desk. So something very cool, very neat. I recommend that you play with it, use it to test your logic, troubleshoot. And that concludes our time together, highlighting the new simulator and new data monitor in 10.6.219 of PAC Machine Edition. Certainly appreciate you joining us, and hope you'll join us for another video highlighting something new in the future. Thank you.